Moving on now to Dr. Janine Croser and Dr. Nick Paltridge from SARDI, who are coming to talk to us. So I'll give you a little bit of an introduction. Dr. Croser has led research teams to deliver over $40 million in collaborative crop, pasture and genetic improvement initiatives across university, private sector and government. In her current role as program leader for crop pasture improvement at SARDI, Janine supports her team to deliver essay-focused research in the areas of molecular genetics, wheat, oat, pulse and pasture, pure breeding and crop ecophysiology. Not very good at saying that. The CPI team deliver the National VTech breeding program and collaborate with private sector in lucerne breeding. Her own research interests include harnessing opportunities in agricultural emissions reduction, currently through involvement in zero net emissions in agriculture CRC funded research, into methane mitigation form pastures and as a lead for the SA Action Research Network component of the GRDC PIRSA SARDI Low Emissions Intensity Farming or LEAFS program. So welcome Janine, and I will also just take a moment to introduce Nick. So Nick has just started with SARDI in the LEAFS program also, and his previous life was working with Mallee Sustainable Farming, where he delivered quite a lot of extension programs and worked in sustainability projects. Prior to that, there was research at Waite and also was prior a farmer. So welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Quite a few mouthfuls there, and thanks very much to the organisers for the invitation for Nick and I to speak today. I should mention that Mark Callow, the program lead for LEAFS at GRDC, was originally intended to come here today to introduce LEAFS, so I'm perhaps a very poor stand-in for Mark, but I'll do my best to give you a little bit of background as to what the program is looking to achieve in the state. But also I'd like to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what SARDI's doing for cropping, and our colleague Alice Weaver is talking in the concurrent session about what they're doing for livestock and methane mitigation at SARDI. So without further ado, I believe all of you will be familiar with SARDI. If you live in South Australia and operate farms here in South Australia, you will have come into contact with our research and our people. Our mission is to deliver world-class, independent, applied research outcomes that support our primary industry sector. We work at the interface between basic research and product development. Our focus is certainly, like I've said, very applied. Within the Crop Sciences Division, which is led by Tim Sutton, and Tim's here today if you want to, he's actually down the back of the room. Put your hand up, Tim. Tim's here, he's our leader. We provide research across agronomy, irrigated crops, entomology, plant health and diagnostic, and crop and pasture improvement. We have around 150 people that work across the regions and at our Waite campus facility. And while our primary research investment partner is GRDC in the crop sector, we also work closely with SAGIT, Horticulture Innovation, MLA, CRCs, and a range of other funding bodies. And together we aim to deliver research that's specific to South Australia and support resilient and profitable primary industries. So why now? And I think Kate did a great job of outlining where we're at in terms of regulatory pathways that are coming into place for emissions and emissions reporting. We see it as quickly becoming a business issue for grain growers. Export customers and processors are starting to get under pressure to report their Scope 3 emissions, and that means they're going to be needing at some point farm-level data. The EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism is already rolling out, and that's designed to create a level playing field and to stop people starting to take industries into countries that perhaps have less stringent reporting arrangements and carbon regulation. So there will be a price that is paid on goods that go into the EU. It's not yet including grain, but it does include fertiliser. So that's probably something that's going to be directing the future for us in the probably short to medium term. If we can't provide credible data, we risk losing access. So the question, I think, isn't if, but when. And the growers who get ahead of the curve now are highly likely to have an advantage in securing future market access and price premiums. So knowing your emissions number is the starting point, and Kate's outlined that well. It highlights where you can improve efficiency, especially in that nitrogen space with nitrous oxide losses. And improving that nitrogen use efficiency will reduce your emissions and it will save your business money. So there's two benefits there, and everyone already knows that. And it positions you for new revenue opportunities. So the bulk handlers and the maltsters in particular are already starting to run these low emission grain pilots, and it also means that you're going to be ready to report when it becomes part of BAU, doing your business as usual. And if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So our role in all of this at SARDI is to generate the data and the solutions that will give you some confidence, practical, farm-ready options to measure, monitor and manage those emissions without reducing your profitability. So the SA government has committed $8.4 million over in the last budget in 2024. And that's designed to be rolled out over 5 years, and it has revenue targets associated with it. So the intent is that we will be looking to co-invest with RDCs and others to leverage that to about $24 million to be spent here in South Australia on these issues. We're investing this money across the primary industries portfolio, so it'll include wine, it'll include horticulture, livestock, but we're also going to be investing quite a lot of money in the crop space. Now, how are we doing that? Well, we're engaging in these national initiatives that you've heard a bit about this morning. So we're a Tier 2 partner in the Zero Net Emissions for Ag CRC. And as a Tier 2 partner, we're actually the major partner for South Australia with that CRC. We are also working closely with GRDC to deliver the LEAFs program, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. We're also investing it in smaller projects. So any projects that come through our hands as sort of leaders at SARDI that we go, well, that's got a real emissions focus and we can see an opportunity to co-invest and to leverage into that particular project, then we're starting to do that as well. And an example is a SAGIT project that went up on measuring soil carbon this year. And I'll just continue on. So before I start too much to talk about LEAFs, I'd just like to highlight 3 other projects that are already on the ground and that weren't set up with an emissions focus but actually feed into this space really effectively. The first is one led by Brian Hughes, and that's looking at liming practices and alternative liming sources. We all know that traditional lime generates CO2 during production and spreading, and the research into the alternative sources aims to understand the emissions implications of different sources and the application practices, reduce our emissions intensity by lowering the carbon footprint of the product and the way we are applying it, and sort of ultimately improve soil health, which will lead to better nitrogen use efficiency and higher yield per tonne, which, as Kate mentioned, higher productivity is going to reduce your emissions intensity. There's a second project that's run by Nigel Wilhelm, and he's looking at how nitrogen moves through the system using labelling, so using a label that they attach to the nitrogen and then track the fate of it through the system. And this identifies where the inefficiencies occur, how we can better time our nitrogen applications, how to place it, what the soil conditions are doing to losses in the nitrogen system. And obviously every kilogram of nitrogen lost is a cost to you and in also emissions to the atmosphere. Finally, we've been doing a lot of work over the years on legumes, and I think the fruit of that is clear in the paddocks as you drive from here back to Adelaide. There's a lot of lentils now in rotation in our systems, but there's also a growing number of paddocks of vetch, and as mentioned in my introduction, we run the National Vetch Breeding Program. So we all know legumes fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, they reduce that need for synthetic fertiliser, but they're also improving soil structure and microbial activity, so again, improving productivity. So just finally, I'll just give you a very brief overview of what the Low Emission Intensive Farming System program is coming out of GRDC. There are 4 integrated research components. The overall goal is, as Kate said, to have 80% of grains production with a known emissions intensity number by the end of the program, which is 2030. So that's an ambitious goal that we'll all be working towards as a central tenet, and we'll see where we get to by 2030, but let's hope. So the programs are sitting under a program office which is run by CSIRO. We have capture and grower value, which was quite a small part, and that's all about looking at what credentialing schemes are out there already, what can people tap into now. There will be a user guide at the end of that, and I believe it's intended to be a sort of interactive online guide to let you know what's going on in the ecosystem and where you might be able to start to get benefit from knowing your number. In the centre of all of this, we have National Data Analytics and Insights, and that is again a CSIRO-led project in collaboration with the University of Sydney, and they'll be looking to develop a national inventory of some of the baselining data. They'll also be working on modelling to establish what the benchmarks are across the nation. We then have Accessible Greenhouse Gas Monitoring Program and PIRSA Major Programs. Our colleagues at PIRSA Major Programs are a key part of that project. It's led by CSIRO, it's in collaboration with WA, DPIRD and with New South Wales DPIRD, and they'll be looking at establishing regional data, so scenario modelling, ensuring that we can start to get marginal abatement cost curves designed for some of the practices to see how much benefit you get. You know, where's your bang for your buck in this system? And finally, Nick's going to really delve into this one in detail. SARDI's leading the South Australian component of the Action Research Network, part of LEAFs, and this is looking at farm level emissions accounts and demo sites, and we'll be rolling those out in the coming years. Lynn McDonald is a key person and key contact for this in South Australia, so if you do have questions about the other components of LEAFs after today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and I can put you in contact with Lynn. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Nick to get into the tin tacks of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Janine. So as you can see, our LEAFs project it's got many project partners, which is part of what makes the project so exciting to me. We're already collaborating with CSIRO and collaborators and friends in the Departments of Ag in WA and New South Wales. Emma McInerney's here from the AgX Alliance. We'll be working closely with that and with Emma to deliver this project, and of course we thank GRDC for the funding. So the goals of our project are really to increase adoption of greenhouse gas accounting, to protect or enhance market access, and to learn with farmers regarding practices we can apply to reduce emissions or emissions intensity on farm. So it can be about absolute emissions reduction, but it can also be about producing grain with less emissions per kilo of product. And GRDC's been quite specific about the fact that we're to maintain or improve production and profitability. So it's not about shutting the farm gate on inputs. We've got to maintain that production and productivity and profitability focus as well. In SA, it's been set up as a collaboration with between SARDI and the AgX Alliance. So both the landscape boards and the AgX Alliance have been running events like today's over the past 12 months or so through the Carbon Farming Outreach Program. AgX's strategy has been to train up agronomists in carbon accounting and why emissions management matters and get at farmers that way. And our strategy is to deliver the ARN through that network. We really want to build momentum from CFOP and take things through to an implementation phase. So the way we see it working is that we'll set up 4 regional hubs across South Australia, Eyre Peninsula, Northern and Yorke, southeastern Kangaroo Island, and also the Mallee. It is participatory research, so regional priorities will be guided by local agronomists and also farmers. Our specific goals include establishing 10 demonstration sites in each region, or up to 10, coming up with a menu of emissions reduction options for each region. We will try to deploy multiple strategies at some sites, but we'll also be looking at some strategies in isolation and value-adding to existing activities. Basically, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. If there's a soil amelioration project happening somewhere, we'll put an emissions lens over that and count that as a demonstration site. We don't want to be reinventing the wheel. We've just had a great session from Kate on carbon accounting, so I won't dwell for too long on this, but really increasing farmer comfort with carbon accounting is within our remit. It'll be a great first step at each site. We've started working with a couple of farmers already to get a handle on what emissions look like in different regions, and actually so that we can figure out what the challenges are in getting emissions data. As Kate said, yield and fertiliser inputs are the easy part of carbon accounting, and the real legwork is in working out the inputs, the general herbicides and pesticides, or the paraquat, dicot and glyphosate. You know, so the farmers we've worked with, not all of them use AgWorld for everything. Some of them do just rely on spray books, or they don't apply the Agro's recommendation as it's written, so there's some work in figuring out what actually happened. Of course, the interesting part in carbon accounting is seeing what the main emission sources are, and we've seen some of this from Kate already. I think a lot of farmers don't realise what their overall footprint is, and the ones I've seen often in a cropping operation, the footprint will be around 500 to 2,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. Scope 3s, in the pink there, make up about half the farm footprint, so something like half the Scope 3s are in the fertiliser that farmers bring onto farms, and the other half of the Scope 3s are in the crop protection products that come onto farms. Scope 2s, as Kate pointed out, don't get stressed about your electricity bill because it accounts for about 0% of your overall emission. And then for your Scope 1s, the emissions that happen on farm, they tend to be about 10 or 20% fuel, 17%, so it's CO2 from fuel. It's mostly nitrous oxide from fertilisers gassing off on farm. And then that piece of pie there in purple, really, it's unfortunate. You get stung for the decomposition of crop residues on your farm. It might seem unfair to get stung for that, but it's not the carbon that's coming out of the residues, it's the nitrous oxide when the crop residues decay. So that is nitrous oxide that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that cropping operation. And you get pinged for that, and it's often about 11%. So Pinion have been doing a project funded by, I think, GPSA and PIRSA to footprint about 60 farms across the state. And we will work with that data, but we also plan to add to that data set with some footprints from our own program to build up a picture of what typical footprints look like in each part of SA. Simply knowing your number may provide opportunities for better market access in future. But obviously reducing emissions or emissions intensity is the long-term goal. Now we're just in the phase now of reviewing emissions reduction options for our grain growers, with our grain growers and our consultants. Big ticket items for emissions reduction, we think, are probably going to relate to nitrogen. The use of enhanced efficiency fertilisers. I'm really interested to hear Helen Suter speak next because I want to learn more about them. Using non-urea nitrogen sources. If you can use SOA instead of urea, that'd be great because you get less Scope 3s and less nitrous oxide coming off your paddock. If you can deep band your urea, that'd be great. You'll get less gassing off, and that will influence your Scope 1s. If you can use legumes, that would be very beneficial because you've got less bag nitrogen coming onto the farm, so less Scope 3s and actually less Scope 1s. So they're the big ticket items that we want to look at, and there'll be likely initial targets for demonstration sites. But there's a host of other things that come up in conversations about emissions that we see in references that are relevant to emissions. I've had a hell of a lot of trouble trying to refine the list of possible LEAFs eligible activities down to something manageable, and I'm not sure how well I've done. I just want to say that anything that helps you refine the efficiency of inputs use is in scope, so that can be vary rate, fertiliser application, It can also be very rate liming. We don't want to be wasting lime, which costs you emissions on areas that don't need liming. But even optical spraying of weeds is in scope because it allows you to reduce the amount of inputs needed to control your weeds. And of course, the thing that did my head in about 2 weeks into joining this project is that everything in general agronomy is also in scope because it can improve your productivity. You've got a bigger number up top and you get a better emissions intensity. So soil amelioration is one classic example where you can get a 50% productivity improvement after claying or deep ripping or doing strategic tillage. I mean, that might be the biggest win you can get. It'll probably only be in a small area of your farm though. So we want to look at all those things as well. They're all in scope. And then there's some other things that I didn't know how to categorise, like fuel efficient tractors would be in scope. Jackie Dabiol tells me that hybrid tractors are already a thing in horticulture. Maybe they'll come and improve our fuel efficiency in the fairly near term. Planting trees, Janine told me to take that one off because it's not on the list of GRDC eligible activities for leaves, but we're going to hear this afternoon from Holly, who's going to talk about how in her particular cropping system, a manageable area, 32 hectares, offset a pretty useful proportion of their cropping emissions. So I think we'll just keep in the back of our minds that planting trees could be part of the answer as well. Unproductive parts of your farm, GRDC, so we're not impacting productivity. Could be in scope. So this is my last slide. I've only been in the job for 5 weeks, but the farmers I've met have said, well, mate, tell me what's the perfect cropping system look like? And my answer at this stage is that probably it's a bit like optimising your landing percentage, where no single action will make a big difference to your overall performance. But if you combine a whole lot of 1 or 2 percenters with a couple of 5 percenters, you might get to a number that's significantly better than business as usual. So I'll probably start repeating myself here, but best practice agronomy, a whole host of things, higher legume intensity, some low emissions fertilisers, some non-urea nitrogen. Maybe my pipe dream is that in a few years' time, our scope 3s can come down because the manufacturers of the fertilisers or the cropping inputs clean up their act, and then we'll have a smaller number to include as our scope 3s. Jeff White's going to be driving around in a hybrid tractor in 10 years' time, and we'll be in a significantly better position. So when I've tried to give this talk to farmers in the past, I've said I've said there is an imperative to act, but the grain sector is an emissions efficient industry already. People are going to want your food. Your job is just to be as emissions efficient as you can, and then you'll guarantee market access. You might get a premium, and people are going to keep buying your product if you do all that. So I will leave it there. I just want to say in my parting words, we don't have all the answers yet on what the best approaches are, but we do hope to come up with some good regional information to inform decision making. Please do look out for our project meetings and demonstration sites, and get in touch if you'd like to discuss accounting, emissions reduction, or even better, host a trial. Thank you.
We have got time for questions, so if there's any questions of Nick or Janine.
Come on, surely there's one.
I've asked a good question. What's the timeline on LEAF? How long will it take?
We have 4 years to run these demonstrations. It's a 5-year investment.
Okay, great. All right, excellent. I look forward to 10 demonstration sites.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot, yeah.
You'll be busy attending them all.
How have you pulled the data together from the different farmers?
Of the 2 that I've been to,
Oh,
I've only been to 2. So GPSA ran a project they pulled data from 60 farmers via Pinion, and and that data is going to be shared to us in de-identified form. We do have some challenges over data management, but we're in the process of doing up a data sharing agreement. Our feeling is we're going to be looking, so farmers that are hosting a particular intervention on a particular paddock are highly likely to share their data with us at the paddock level. At enterprise level, it can be trickier to gain that permission, and we will have to promise to keep it de-identified, keep it stored safely, and perhaps only promote it widely as a contribution to a regional average.
But even grubbing from AgWorld, there's a lot of information, but it's not necessarily user-friendly to extract out of AgWorld.
Yes, and I still haven't worked with a farmer that uses AgWorld really well, and so we have used a combination of spray books and real information and a few guesstimates. And if you're going to ask me how is Bungie or Viterra going to come and validate those footprints in years to come, I don't quite have the answers. I would defer that to Kate, but I would say I heard of an interesting example. So Treasury Wines can't sell its wine into parts of Europe unless there's a verified number attached to it. And I hesitate to say this, but what Treasury's approach has been to get grape growers to pay $2,000 to have a Treasury auditor come and go through their books and validate the information. So that is one vision of the future, which you may not like. Another is that we'll have some real whiz-bang APIs. I'm learning, I don't even know what the acronym is, but a program interface, something that talks to AgWorld and your accounting software, and then gets a verifiable number from there into your footprint.
Great. I look forward to that. Data is king, let's be honest. All right, thank you.